In this video, we'll build a responsive HTML email template with tables. Okay guys, so I'm excited to share this new HTML email template tutorial with you. My goal for this video is to get up to 200 likes, and if you end up liking this video, remember to subscribe and turn on your notifications for new tutorials. So the best way to tell if an email template design is responsive is to simply size the window down in Gmail, and if a two-column layout turns into a single-column layout, that tells us that the email template will display properly across most mobile devices. And just to show you, I have the email template open in Apple Mail on my iPhone on the left, and you'll see that it's a little bit narrower with Apple Mail's bar that appears off to the sides of the template, but it displays just fine nonetheless. And then on the right, I have Yahoo Mail open, which will display it at a little bit of a wider layout than in Apple Mail. So now that we've seen the template in Gmail and on my cell phone with Apple Mail and Yahoo Mail, let's take a look at it in Google Chrome. So the template includes a logo, a banner image, the text section, the two-column responsive layout, and then the footer section where we'll have the different e-commerce rows of text, followed by the social media icons at the very bottom. So you'll notice that the banner image we'll use has text in the image itself, and that's because in order to add text on top of background images in HTML email and have it display properly in email clients, that would take up about the full length of this video. And in addition to that, we won't be designing for Outlook with Windows because that will require us to add something called conditional statements and ghost tables. But if you'd like to learn how to design email templates that work with all testable email clients, I'm going to show you a resource in just a moment. But first, let's take a look at what we need to get started with the tutorial. So in the description of this video, I'll have tutorial starter files that you can download. And that includes index.html, which you see right here, and I have open in the free text editor Visual Studio Code in the background. Then also included is the image folder, which includes all of the images and icons used in the email template that we'll build in this tutorial. And lastly, there's a file called html-email-course.html where you can preview my complete email course, which I'll also have a link to in the video description. And of the 10 email templates and email signature that are included, the email template that we'll build today is most like the apparel template that you see right here. And lastly, before we get started, I want to mention that the text editor that we'll be using today called Visual Studio Code, I have a lesson on at my website, w3newbie.com. If you just go to the resources page, then drop down to Visual Studio Code text editor, you can check out that lesson to see the extensions and shortcuts that I use. Okay, so now let's go over to Visual Studio Code and see what's already included for us. But first, I'm going to hit the Go Live button in the lower right-hand corner to start up the live server extension with Visual Studio Code. And to see that I'm connected to Chrome, what I can do is just change the background color to black. And as you can see, the window with Chrome changes from black and back to gray. So now let's go over what's already included for us inside of the index.html file that I've prepared, with the head section information as well as the HTML comments in the body of the document. So let's start at the top of the document with the document type, which is XHTML 1.0 transitional, and this is still the most compatible document type to use with HTML email for email client compatibility. Then we have charset UTF-8, which is the standard character set for numbers and letters on the internet, followed by a compatibility meta tag for Internet Explorer and Microsoft Edge. Then with device width initial scale 1 for mobile devices, and the title tag where it says apparel HTML email template, which isn't necessary for sending HTML emails, but if you want to send somebody to a live link of your template, you can include a title for the web page. Next, we have some internal style included for us, starting with the body style with margin 0 to get rid of any space around the edges of the template. Then we have a background color set, which is the light gray shade with the hex value all C's. And there's also some reset styling to get rid of border spacing, padding, and just borders in general around tables, table data tags, and images for different email clients. And as you know, further down the page, I've included HTML comments for different sections of the template as we lay out our HTML. Okay, so with that, let's start laying laying out our HTML for the template, starting with the centering of our email template. So when it comes to centering email templates, we can use tags that are no longer valid with the latest version of HTML, but an email template still work perfectly well. So we're going to use the center tag and give it a class called wrapper. Then I'll drop the closing center tag down to the bottom of the body section, and we'll include our table inside of this. So let's move back up the document, and underneath the center tag, we'll add the table tag, and this is what's going to include all of our table rows for different sections of the template. So let's add table, and we're also going to give this a class that we'll call main, and we'll give it a width of 100% using the width attribute. Then I'm going to take the closing table tag and, similar to the center tag, move it down to the bottom of the document and then just correct the indentation around it. So now we're ready to start styling the classes to center the template first before we add any content inside of it. So let's take the wrapper class to center the template, reinforce the background color, and we're going to make sure that it displays at 100% width for smaller screens. So let's add a period for the class followed by the wrapper text to identify it, and we'll give this a width of 100%. And then we're also going to add table layout fixed, which is going to make it so the center tag is no wider than the table that's nested inside of it. And for the background color, to make sure that all email clients display the background color, we can just take that from the body tag and paste that in with background color and the hex value all C's for the light gray shade. And the last thing that we'll do is let's add some space to the bottom of the template by adding some padding to the bottom. So I'm going to add padding bottom 40 pixels. Okay, so now we can start styling the main class for the main table, wrapping around all of the content that we'll be adding. So let's give it a background color for inside of the table of white, which will be the default background color outside of the sections where we'll specify a different background color. So we'll add background color and then all F's for the hex value, which is white. Then to reinforce the centering, let's add margin 0 auto, and we'll give it a width of 100% to make sure that it displays at the full width of the window for smaller screens. So width 100%. Then we'll also set a max width of 600 pixels, which is pretty much the standard width for email templates for email client compatibility. Then I'm also going to add border spacing 0 to make sure there's no spacing around the edges of our table. So we'll add border spacing and then 0 for the value. And lastly, let's specify a color for our text, which will appear towards the bottom of the template in the footer section. So if we scroll down, you'll see that we have this dark gray text color. So to achieve that, let's add color, and the hex value is 4A, 4A, 4A. Okay, so with that, let's move down to the first comment where it says brown border and add the border that appears above the logo with the brown background color there. So each section of the template will start with a table row tag and then a table data tag inside of that and a table inside of the table data tag. So some sections we'll have the table and we'll set a width of 100% before we can add our content. So if we add paragraph text inside of the table, so I'll just write text and then save it, we'll start to see the layout of the actual table with the white background. But in this section, we're just going to need the table row and table data tags because we're not going to have any actual content aside from the background color. So we'll give the section a height of 8 or 8 pixels. But since we're using the height attribute, we don't need to say pixels or px. And then we'll add style and background color. Then the brown hex value is B8714E, which is the brown shade we'll use throughout the template. So there we see our bar at the top, matching the original, and if we span down, it will only take up 100% of the screen without flowing outside of that on small screens. So now we're ready to add the logo that displays underneath of it, and since we're going to add some spacing around the logo image, in this case we're going to have a table row with the table data tag and then the table inside of it. And once again, we'll set a width of 100% for the table. And then I'll create some space and we'll have a new set of table row and table data tags so we can add the padding and center the logo image. So I'll add TRTD, and for the image, we're going to use an anchor text tag to create a link around the image with the A tag, followed by IMG for the image. Then we can set a URL, so I'll just set it to the link to my email course, which is w3newbie.com/email-course. And then what we can do is set the actual image URL. So that's going to be inside of the image folder with img/ followed by apparel.png for the image file. So I'll write apparel.png. So now if we save it and take a look in Chrome, we'll see our image, but it's displaying larger than we want it to. So what we can do is set the width with the width attribute, and I'm going to give it a width of 180 pixels. Then we can also add a title. So I'll add the title attribute and just write apparel. Then once we save it and hover over the image for a moment, it's going to say the apparel text. Additionally, we can add alternative text in case the image doesn't display. It's going to say apparel logo, as you see. And you can do this with any of the images throughout the template if you want, but for now, let's center the apparel logo and add some padding around it. So we're going to use a table data tag that wraps around it, and I'll add text align center, and if I save it, there it's centered, and then let's also add padding with 15 pixels all around. So now if we save it and take a look, we'll be matching up to the original down to the logo, so we're ready to move on to the banner that appears underneath it. So with the banner, we're not going to need to add any styling around it, so we won't need this inner table row and table data tag, so we won't need the table either. So we can just use a simple TR and TD. Then inside of this, we'll have the link with the image inside of that link, similar to the logo. And I'm going to leave the link blank in this case with a hashtag inside of ahref. And then the URL for the link will be img/banner.jpg. So now if we save it and take a look, we have the banner image, but it's displaying too wide. So let's give it a width of 600 to match the width of the template overall. And then once we size it down, we'll also need to give it a maximum width. So let's add style and max width 100%, so it doesn't span outside of the window underneath 600 pixels. Okay, so now we're ready to add the background color with the text that appears underneath it saying, shop our latest deals. So this will be more similar to the layout of the logo than the brown bar at the top of the template, because we're going to need to add some styling around the text that we add. So similar to the logo section, let's add TR, so table row, table data, and table. Then let's give our table its width of 100%. And for the styling that we'll add a new set of table row and table data tags. Then inside of this, we'll have our paragraph text where it says, shop our latest deals. So now if we save it and go over, we'll have our text appearing, but it appears smaller than we want and without the background color. So let's align it centered first with text align center, and then increase the font size. So I'll give it a font size of 25 pixels. And then we can set the brown background color that we used previously with the hex value B8714E. And then I'm going to change the color of the text to white with all Fs for the hex value. Okay, so now if we save it and go back to the original, we'll be matching up down to that point. So we're ready to move on to the two-column section with the images and the buttons underneath it, which will be the responsive section of the template. Okay, so let's move on to the two-column HTML comment and start off with our table row, table data, and table tag, and we'll give our table its width of 100%. Then inside of this, we're going to have our additional set of table row and table data tags, but in this case, we're going to give our table data tag a class so we can identify this section in the CSS. So we'll add tr, and then inside of that we'll have td class, and we'll call it 2 columns with td period 2 dash columns. And inside of this table data tag, we'll have an additional table representing each one of the columns, including an image and a button underneath. So we'll add table, and we're going to give this its own class so we can style it, called column. And then inside of that, we'll have a new set of table row and table data tags before we can add our actual content, which will start with the image that we're seeing. So we'll add our anchor text tag with the image inside of it, and I'll leave the link blank. And then the image for this will be img/women.jpg. And if we save it and take a look, there we have the image, but it's displaying at wider than half of the column, which is 300 pixels. So we'll do something similar to what we did for the banner image. We're going to give it a width of 300 pixels. So now if we save it, it should look like the original in the sizing at least. And we'll also want to add some space to the bottom of it before we get to the button. So we'll add padding bottom 40 pixels. And once I save it, if we take a look, we'll have space for the button underneath that now with the separation using the padding. So for the button, we're going to use an anchor text tag, and we'll give it a class called button. And I'm going to leave the link blank, and then we can add the text where it says shop women's, and we'll style the button with our internal style after we take care of the columns classes. Then one change is I'm actually going to set this to a max width of 300 pixels instead of 100%. Okay, so with that, all of the content here for the first column with the image and the button underneath will pretty much be the same for the second column. So we can copy the table with the class column and paste that underneath. Then all we'll need to change is the text to men's and the image to men.jpg. And then if we take a look at it, there we have the image and the text for the button displaying underneath that image as well, just like the first column. So now let's go up and start styling this section, starting with the 2 columns class that we see before we get to the table with the column class. So I'm going to copy that text and go up to our style and add that after the period for a class. So we'll add text align center, which will center our tables inside of this 2 columns class. And then I'm also going to add font size 0 to do away with inherent spacing that email clients may add to this section using font size. And padding, I'm going to add 40 pixels of padding to the top and bottom of this section to match the original, to get some spacing between the brown border up top and the horizontal section underneath. So now if we save it and take a look, we have our spacing. So we're ready to add the styling for the column for the table to make it so the columns align next to one another at the full 600 pixel width, and then they stack vertically underneath 600 pixels. So we'll start with the 2 columns class, and then after that we'll reference the column class. So we'll use another period followed by column. And we're going to give this a width of 100% and then a max width of 300 pixels to take up 50% of the 600 pixel layout. So max width 300 pixels. And to get them displaying next to one another, we're going to use display inline block. So display inline dash block. And then one other thing that we'll add in addition to this, now that we have them displaying next to one another and we have them centered, is we're going to add something called vertical align top. And this style declaration will make it so email clients will respect the columns stacking on top of one another on mobile. Then additionally, to center the button, we're going to add text align center. And we'll add some space underneath this, but first we can bring back our button by adding some font size here. So we'll add font size 18 pixels, and I'll also add padding bottom 40 pixels to separate the button and the next image that will appear underneath it. Okay, so now we're ready to style the actual button. So if you remember, we added the button class. So all we'll need to do is reference that class here by adding period button. Then the background color for the button is going to be 464646 with the hex value, which is a dark gray shade. We can set the color of the text to white and then get rid of the underline with text decoration none. And we'll add some internal spacing with padding and 15 pixels top bottom and 20 pixels left right. Then we'll just soften the edges slightly with some border radius, so you can add as much as you want, but I'm just going to add a little bit with 2 pixels. Okay, so once that's saved with our 2 column section laid out, we're ready to drop down to the footer section or the horizontal section where we have the text in between the different borders and the social media icons at the very bottom underneath that. Okay, so let's move down to the footer HTML comment, and then we'll start our section off with our table row, table data, and table tag. Then we'll give the table a width of 100%. And before we start adding the border and text, let's set the background color for the entire section by adding style background color. And this is going to be a light gray shade of EF, EF, EF for the hex value. And I'll also add text align center because all of these text sections in between the border will be centered here in the footer. Okay, so first let's add a table row and table data tag where we can set the border that we're seeing with the dark gray shade. So this will be similar to the brown border up top, and we can just copy that if we want and paste that in. Then we'll change the height. So I'm going to go from 8 pixels to 3 pixels, and the hex value will be 969696 for the gray shade that we'll use. And there we have our first border. Then underneath that, we'll have some paragraph text where it says new arrivals. So I'll add a new table row and table data tag. Then we'll have a paragraph tag inside of this where it says new arrivals. So I'll just type that out in all caps. And then we're going to give this a larger font size because right now it's just going to be the default size. So let's set the font size here with style, then font size 22 pixels. And then I'm also going to add some padding around it to match the original with the spacing that we're seeing. So we'll add padding all around of 5 pixels. Okay, so now if we save it, we'll have our first section matching the original, and the next 3 sections are going to be exactly the same except for with different text. So I'll copy these 2 table row instances and paste them under 3 times. And then once we paste it in 3 times, if we save it, we'll see that all we'll need to change now is the text from new arrivals to accessories for the last one. So I'll just go bottom to top. So accessories, then we have shop women's next. So I'll write in shop women's and then shop men's for the second one down. So now once we save it, we can take a look at the version we're working on, and there we have all 4 of the rows set. So let's drop down to the social media icons next at the next HTML comment where it says social media icons. So we'll add our table row, table data, and table and set it to 100%. Then within this, we'll have our new set of table row and table data tags, followed by the icon images. So we'll wrap these with an A tag, and then there'll be dark dash the social media network, and then .png. So A, and then image, and we'll add img/dark dash facebook.png. And if we save it, there we have our Facebook icon, but we'll want to resize it. So we're going to use a 40 pixel width. So I'll set it to width 40. And now what we can do is copy this one and paste it in 3 times for the other social media outlets. So we'll change the second one to Twitter, then YouTube and Instagram. And with our icons added, once we save it, we're ready to add the styling. So let's align them center with text align center. Then I'm going to add some padding to the top and bottom. So we'll add padding 25 pixels top, 0 left right, and 35 pixels to the bottom to create some space before we get to the brown border that's at the very bottom of the template. So again, 35 pixels on the bottom. And then we can change the white background color to that same light gray with the hex value EF, EF, EF. So now if we save it, it looks good except for we're missing that border underneath the accessories text. So I'm going to copy one of these border table rows and just add it underneath the accessories table row. And now with that, we're ready to add the last bit of HTML for the brown border. So once again, I'm going to copy that brown border that we added at the very top of the template. And then all we'll need to change is the height of it. So I'll paste it in and change the height from 8 pixels to 5. Okay, so now once it's saved with the addition of the brown border at the bottom, that completes the entire apparel themed email template. So we have the full width all set, and on the mobile version, we have our responsive sections where the 2-column layout has turned into a single column layout displaying the image and the button underneath. So if we size the window up, they'll shift back into the full width layout displaying next to one another. So with all of our code complete for the email template, let's go about sending ourselves a test email using a feature called putsmail at putsmail.com. So putsmail has an inliner tool here, which I'm going to show you in just a moment. But first, I want to explain that before you can send a test email to yourself, you'll just want to take note that the images we used in the template design are local images inside of the image folder. But in order to see your images show up online in email clients such as Gmail, the images will have to be on the internet already. So there are a couple of options that you can use, and the first in my recommendation is to use a website called imgbb.com, which is a free image hosting platform where you can get direct links to the images. Then you can also use something called placeholder.com to add placeholder images with the exact dimensions of the image in place of it just for testing. So for example, the icon would be 40 by 40, or if we select Command B to open up Explorer here, we can grab one of the images to see the dimensions at the bottom, which is what we'd want to set using the placeholder image links. All right, so let's go back over to putsmail.com and send a test email. So I'll add a subject line here saying apparel HTML email template. And I already have a version of the template with live image links, which I'll paste in. Then select Move My CSS in line from the internal CSS, which we added at the top in the head section, which will place this CSS inside of the HTML tags throughout the template. Then lastly, I'll select I'm Not a Robot and hit Send, which will go to my Gmail address, which I added. So now I'll go over to Gmail, and here we have the HTML email template displaying for us. Okay, so with that, that concludes the entire responsive HTML email template tutorial. I want to thank you for watching. Please remember to like this video, subscribe, turn on your notifications, and check out my complete HTML email course, which there will be a link to in the video description, as well as in the starter files with the HTML email course.html file. Thanks for watching.